Hey, Hannah, thank you so much for joining me for one of our mini series episodes on the Your Sorority Journey podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too. Truthfully, Recruitment Takeover was like really inspired and supported by all the work our intern team is doing, of which you're a part of. So it seems like only fitting that we have one of you on the podcast for Recruitment Takeover.
Yes, definitely. And it's my favorite topic to talk about recruitment and being the only disaffiliated one. So I'm
Right.
here to talk about it when everyone else is like talking about their own chapter. So I'm super excited.
Totally right. As we've been promoting our interns saying like so and so is Kenzie's a 5U at East Carolina University. We were like, Hannah Johnson, disaffiliated, University of South Carolina,
Recruitment counselor, yeah.
recruitment counselor. So, Hannah, tell us what made you want to be a recruitment counselor? Go through the application process. I know University of South Carolina is already like doing their training. You're like pretty like knee deep in this work. What made you want to even apply?
So I like loved my whole recruitment process, and I met like some of my best friends in my we call it Pi Chi at South Carolina, my Pi Chi group.
Yes.
So I was like had the best experience, and I was like since literally bid day, like my freshman year, I was like I want to be Pi Chi just so I can like have that impact and like help other like women find their home and like love their chapters as much as I do, and just the like cliches of like trusting the process and stuff, but just really like helping them be confident in their like
Yeah.
throughout the recruitment process because it's so emotionally and like physically draining, but just bringing that energy and making them excited to continue and run home on bid day.
Yes, I love that. Running home on bid day. And what's fun, as you've seen happen before, is you now get to run to your home on bid day
I
too and
know
like relive that.
I get to do it a second time, so I feel like it's gonna be even more special this time, but somehow
Yeah.
everybody.
Well, you know what? And I truly believe this about recruitment. The most stressful role to play in recruitment every single time is a potential new member, right? Because as stressful as it is to organize the logistics, if you were the chapter's vice president of recruitment or oversee the whole thing on the Panhellenic executive board, you've already found your home. You already have your sisters, you already have your community. And I think that's something we so often forget when we like get in the trenches of recruitment logistics and we forget, wait, we have a sisterhood, we have somewhere we belong. The whole point of this is allowing these new potential new members to find that for themselves as well. So I'm sure that's actually why you're more excited is because you know what you're running home
Yes,
to.
yes, definitely. But it is so special though to like have that in the back of your mind, like know that like every girl is gonna find that. And so I think that's like
Mm,
we talk about this a lot in the part two, the training that we did as podcasts, but just like having that intention of when you do disaffiliate and not disaffiliating because you don't want to go through how tiring recruitment is or like how you have to stand up against a wall and cheer all day long, but how you genuinely just want to help
yeah.
those PNMs like have that like place to run home to and something that they love that much and continue to go home for meals and just hangouts and stuff like
Yeah.
at the chapter house. But I think it's like the best opportunity ever and I'm so excited for it.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, and I know that the recruitment counselor role varies from campus to campus, right? Some campuses, it's like sought after. It's hard to be a recruitment counselor because people want to do it, and either because they loved their recruitment counselor, they loved or Pi Chi or Rho Gamma or whatever you call it, right? They loved that mentor they had in recruitment and want to be that for someone else, or they're like a little upset with their chapter and they're like, I don't can't authentically recruit for my chapter. I'm just going to go find another role so I don't get fined, right? Bad intentions. We'll talk about that in a second. Or it could be on the other sphere of things where you can't get applications for the recruitment counselor role because everybody wants to recruit for their own chapter. There's so much pride and enthusiasm for being a member of that chapter that you don't want to leave. You don't want to lose your letters or take off that like badge of honor for some people. They look at their organization as like a status symbol. And I think there's some campuses that are a combination of both, kind of depending on the chapter, but many like fall into one camp or the other. Typically. And you were just bringing up how in path 2 of the Her Sorority Journey course, which your group of Pi Chis went through in the spring, we talk about the intentions you have being a recruitment counselor, how sometimes those can be like really good intentions if I want to be the mentor that I had, or I want to be the mentor that I didn't have if I didn't have a recruitment counselor with good intentions. Or you are there because you don't want to recruit for your chapter. Maybe you have some like hurt or disappointment with your organization that you haven't worked through yet. What are your thoughts on like the different like intentions that people have going into this role?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing is like we've talked about this so many times before, but like when you like run back home, like whatever the PNMs have associated you with, they're gonna associate your chapter with. So
Yep.
even if, like you're going through recruitment as a break, like part of you are still in the chapter. Like you don't want a bad reputation for your chapter, even if you're mad at your chapter for some reason. So if you're like have a bad attitude throughout all of recruitment and like you're mean or like trashing other chapters, like the
Yeah.
PNMs are gonna be like, that's what your chapter is made of. But if you're going in with like those right intentions of just wanting them to find their home and you're like positive and like helping them be confident and loving and caring and just enthusiastic and passionate about the whole process, they're going to associate that with your own chapter. And especially if you're like holding your chapter's values and those of like the larger Panhellenic community, they're going to know that like even if they go to your chapter too, that's like so cool, you get to share that. But if not, they're gonna still like think highly of that. And so like know that, wow, those girls in that chapter are like genuine and authentic and all those things that like when you're recruiting for your own chapter, you still want people to view your chapter as. So I think it kind of plays into, you're not really recruiting for your chapter, but you still like deep down had those letters. And in a couple like I think this time in like 2 months, like I'll be back like the days closer than I feel like. So like
Right.
I'm still representing my chapter even without like the letters like right here on my like pocket on my t-shirt. So
Right. As cheesy as it is, that saying you're always wearing your letters is true, right? If you are out at a party and you aren't screaming Sigma Kappa or whatever your affiliation is, people will still connect you to being a Sigma Kappa, right? In the same way, you are still representing your organization even when you're disaffiliated, because people will know, especially these PNMs who are looking up to you, will immediately associate your behavior that they have watched for the past 2 days to 2 weeks, depending on how long your recruitment is, right? They will associate your behavior with your chapter, even after they've already found their home. And the truth is it doesn't matter like what home they find, if it's yours or someone else's. If you care about your organization, or even if you don't, right? You don't want to associate hardship or, I don't know, disappointment or
yeah,
frustration with your organization, or worse, right? Like poor Panhellenic spirit if you're speaking poorly of other chapters, right? And there's two pieces of this that I want to get into, right? Like living out your chapter's values without wearing your letters, and ensuring or prioritizing the best interests of the Panhellenic community. And so if we're starting, I don't know, Hannah, where do you want to start?
well, I think your chapter's values tie into the Panhellenic community chapter's values. So I feel like if we
Yeah.
start there, then it kind of ties into being like a part of something like bigger than just like your
Yeah.
chapter.
Well, I think you mentioned earlier, like some people look at it as taking a break from their chapter, right? But if you're taking a break from your chapter because you're just like fed up with this officer or this rule or this expectation, fun fact, all of those things are going to be there on bid day, right? Like you can't run from them forever, even if you're trying to take this like extended summer break, if you will, by like removing yourself from that situation. All those things are still going to be there. And so, one thing that we do in path 2 of the Her Sorority Journey course is address those things, as uncomfortable and difficult as it is to say, all right, sister friend, you are still a member of your chapter. If you want to continue, we got to work through these problems so that you can be purposeful and proud of your membership, not just passive or like disheveled, like just disappointed. So, how do we address those things even before bid day, especially before bid day? Because I hate to break it to you, but those things that you're frustrated with, even if you don't talk about them, will come through in how you mentor potential new members. Because if you're over your chapter experience, it's going to come up in the way that you mentor PNMs.
For sure. So I think the biggest thing, and we talked about, or you talked about it when I was doing part 2, is just like that reflection of like if you do have issues like with your chapter and something's just kind of like weighing you down why you don't want to recruit, like reflecting on like the perspective of that and like why is that going on? Like a lot of frustrations right now are revolved around COVID, but it's like kind of honestly after bid day, like those frustrations will hopefully go away because I know our recruitment's going to be in person. And so
Yeah.
hopefully everything's just like normal and stuff. But I think just reflecting and being like, there was a reason why you joined this chapter in the first place. And there's a reason why you're still in it and have it just drop. And so it's like, put that into perspective of like how much you love that and how much you gain and like how those friendships and how like
Yeah.
really those friendships are instead of just focusing on like the negative things. So I just like, I love my chapter so much. That's like been
Yeah.
the struggle of me is that being like, if someone says my chapter, I'm not being like, oh my gosh, and then being like, start talking
Yeah,
about
the opposite. You're like,
it.
God, let me
I
just
know.
like put my,
So,
yeah, tell me
or
more
like even like
about
right
that
now, like not
chapter.
bringing up like our own values, but I think that ties into like the chapter values are like all similar, but like kind of individualized for each chapter. But the Panhellenic community has like values of like friendship, scholarship, like
Yeah.
service, all these things. And it's like your chapter has those own. And when you're like representing the Panhellenic community, like you're representing those and like every other organization. And if you're not excited about like the chapter that you're gonna run back home to that you already know, like how are you gonna expect like PNMs to be to like a chapter they don't even
Right.
know? And not everyone like gets that house that they want. And so it's like how are you gonna be able to like guide them like after that and like before their initiation and be like look at all these things that you've fallen in love with if like you
Yeah.
have that like love and like that like happiness and like joy
Yeah.
your chapter and all that.
Amazing. Yeah. So good. And I think that kind of leads us right into talking about the Panhellenic values, right? So, on one end, we can be not a great ambassador of our own chapter and not live out those values if we don't work through the things that we are frustrated with by our chapter. But also, we can be a bad ambassador of the Panhellenic community if we are so in love and gung ho with our chapter that any feedback from PNMs negative about our chapter or positive about other chapters makes us defensive, right? Because if you don't want to hear or you aren't able to hear that people don't like your chapter or they like other chapters better, it's an important time to remember that this isn't about you, right? And the goal isn't for every PNM that you work with to join your chapter. Like, can you imagine if your chapter had that many PNMs? Like, whew,
Yeah.
not the goal.
I think like my favorite part about like Panhellenic community at South Carolina is that every chapter is so supportive of each other and like I know it's not like that at every school and so this biggest thing that they were telling the PNMs during recruitment is like you'll have best friends in every single chapter. And like the best friend I have
Totally.
in recruitment is in a different chapter than me. And so it's like she takes me to her functions. I
Aw,
take
yeah.
and, like
I love that.
I
Yeah.
get to go to other chapters philanthropy events. And so it's like just the whole panel in the community is so important that like your chapter, like my chapter has its like own like vibe of girls. And like I know that. And like I wouldn't want like if someone doesn't like that, that's okay. Because like I know that I love my chapter and I know that the
Yeah.
people in my chapter love my chapter. And so it's like if someone doesn't like it, like that's okay. Like there's probably a chapter that will love them and they'll love just as much. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of putting like you said, like their needs before like how someone views your chapter. And so I think that's also like having like a high view of all the chapters of your Panhellenic community and the Panhellenic community of itself and knowing like,
Mm,
oh, like she like her and her friend might go two different ways, but they're still gonna support those other chapters and have like a good like reputation for those and think highly of them. And
yep.
so I think that kind of like the disaffiliation are like affiliated recruitment. I know some chapters are going towards that, but we're
Yeah.
disaffiliated so we don't have like a biased perspective of someone's like, oh, like I love her, I need to be in her chapter, or
Yeah.
oh, I'm scared to say I don't like this chapter because she's in that chapter. So
Sure.
like NPC is like kind of recommending going towards affiliated chapters,
Yeah.
or affiliated recruitment counselors. So I think that's kind of an interesting topic of the benefits, I guess, of being affiliated and kind of just not
Yeah.
thinking about it and just like moving on from your affiliation.
Well, yeah, and I think there's still pros and cons to both, right? I think the reason the disaffiliated recruitment counselors exist at all is so that your chapter can like in all areas be put on the back burner to prioritize the P&M's experience, right? However, in that process, I think what's happened, I don't know if this happened for you, Hannah, but I remember going through recruitment as a P&M, like I wanted to know what my recruitment counselor's affiliation was so bad. And I wasn't like as
People,
crazy as some P&Ms.
they like made us put our Venmo transactions on private and
Oh my
all
gosh.
these other crazy things. I'm like, I'm not even gonna remember how to like go back to normal after this. Like I'm gonna like
Right.
something changed for like years that I won't even think about. But it's crazy.
Lindsay, our the executive assistant for her sorority journey, literally still has her Instagram handle without her last name in it from when she was a recruitment counselor.
Yeah.
Like so intense, right?
Mine's Hannah Montana right now, and people are telling me I should keep it, and I'm like, I don't know. So
right. Yeah, you like sorry, said your last name in this episode, but you know,
you're
like we
good. It's common. It's not like
we like get rid of last names, we put our Instagrams on private, we do all these like really extensive things to try to like protect our identity, and then the P&Ms are like, okay, game on, like let me find you, right? And then the focus suddenly isn't on this P&M's experience, and it's on how do we crack the code of the affiliation of our recruitment counselor. And when we play these guessing games of, oh, I bet so-and-so is in this chapter, or I bet this other recruitment counselor is in this chapter, we're actually like fueling the stereotypes of different chapters on our campus, right? If they're associated by like physical appearance or interests, most of those like aren't the healthiest, right? They aren't the most helpful in building up our communities. And so I think NPC is trying to say like, look, like this isn't about you. And I think recruitment counselors listening, like we love you, but this isn't about you, right? Recruiters too. We have an episode for you about that as well. But this is about the potential new member's experience and making sure she feels like seen and appreciated and built up through this process, not so focused on the recruitment counselor's affiliation. And so they're saying, look, what if we just like didn't make it a guessing game and say, hey, these women have chosen to opt out of their recruitment process to mentor you throughout this. They are members of these chapters. They are your guides, right? And maybe P&Ms, like you said, would choose to talk to women who weren't in the chapter that they didn't like, or who were in the chapter that they were what's the word, indifferent about, to just like have an unbiased source, but they could make those decisions focusing on themselves. And so I think when we're thinking about how do we portray like the values of your chapter and the values of the Panhellenic community simultaneously, I think it really comes down to focusing on how do I be the best member of my organization that I can be, even without wearing my letters, and how do I put behind me everything that would make me want to focus on myself or building up my chapter to really intentionally pour into and build up these potential new members.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's like the biggest, going back to those attentions and stuff of like why you're doing it, and like kind of putting those P&Ms like before yourself and your own chapter affiliation, and just like knowing like, hey, that's like still gonna be there like after this 2-week process. Or today was technically our first day of like complete disaffiliation. Like
wow,
nothing to be able to
happy
like
July.
yeah, welcome to full of recruitment. So I think just like having that in mind is like so cool. And you brought up recruiters and like how I like live with members of my chapter. So it's like they're planning their recruitment outfits and stuff, and I'm like not. And so it's like the ways that like we can still kind of share that like bond without like on Instagram, knowing that I'm still a member of that chapter, and still knowing that they're like my friends, and getting to share like during recruitment like their process, but without being like, oh, like you're talking to this girl or like this girl and stuff, but just being like, this is so fun, and like just our perspectives without it being like fully like you have to be a member or like all this, but still respecting the like, hey, let's all not wear our letters on our shirts when we go out, because if I'm with everyone with the same letter, it's an assumption that I'm in it. So
that's a great example of how women in your chapter can like support you over the summer, right? I'm sure campuses as large as yours might have even more rules like during the academic year or like during pre-recruitment about spending time with members of your chapter outside of like privacy.
Yeah.
So that's a great example, like just asking your sisters not to wear their letters when you are together like out and about in Columbia. But what else? I know that some people don't often consider how emotional of a toll the recruitment counselor role can be. And obviously, some of that you haven't experienced yet, right? Like having not created those relationships with PNMs. But
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you how women in your chapter can support you or other recruitment counselors in their chapter well,
Mhm.
and how they could really support as part of that, like bridging your transition back. How can they support you while you're a recruitment counselor, and how can they support you in your transition back into membership?
I think so. I obviously like haven't gone through actual recruitment yet, so I'm sure my response would be different if we did this in like the beginning of September. But I
Sure.
think like the biggest thing is like how just supportive they've been of it. I mean, like you're gonna be like the best podcast ever, and like
Aw.
our when I posted it on my Facebook and my sisters were like commenting on it, and I was like, guys, you can't do that. If they look at your profile, they're gonna see you like. But
Guys, come on, put it together. Yeah.
and also I've like as a lot of like my pie guy did this and I really loved it. Or like my pie guy did this and I wish we
Mm,
had it. So I think a lot of it, like
just
I love like
feedback.
feedback and criticism. That way, like they're helping me like be the best pie guy and like
Yeah.
to have those like relationships of like we do a really cute thing where like your little will like make you a poster like welcome back home and stuff. So I think just like
Aw.
maintaining those relationships and stuff that way, like when you come back home, like run back home, it feels like you didn't really like leave for that long of a time. But I think it makes it easy just kind of living with members of my chapter still
Sure.
to kind of feel connected. So, but I think that's up. Kind of depends on like the vibes and relationships between it. But I think like the support and just kind of like advice of like how to be a good pie kai or recruitment counselor, I think is really beneficial because there's not like it gets kind of we have a lot of rules of like talking about recruitment or like all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard. Like I anticipate it will be hard like during the actual process to be super like helpful and supportive, even though I know like they want to be, but just because it gets kind of
Yeah.
dicey with rules and sharing stuff or stuff I don't even want to know about, like if there's
Right.
weird rumors going around, all this stuff to just help give my PNMs like the best experience that they can have.
Amazing. And I would say, having been disaffiliated before going back into my chapter, I would encourage women to be extremely intentional to reconnect with your recruitment counselors or your members of Panhellenic Exec as much as you are with those new members who you are craving relationships with now that they're members of your organization. So often we can like get in our sentimental bubble of like how sweet certain things about recruitment were, which is amazing, but start to create even more memories with the women who weren't there because they were representing your chapter from a different side.
Yes, for sure. I definitely agree with that.
Amazing. Hannah, thank you so much for sharing a couple quick tips and suggestions and just insight for our recruitment counselors. We are so excited for you to mentor potential new members very soon, in a few weeks,
Very
honestly.
soon.
Um, and we're just so thankful to have you on the team.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So fun to talk to you.
Bye.